Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Well, I'm having problems with my screen and I can't access Zoom now for some reason. Sorry about that. All right, okay, that's working. Okay, so let's start. As usual, we can stay a bit later and you can ask questions and stuff like that. Okay, so today's program is finish the introduction and hopefully the chapter 1 or go as far as possible as we can. So some of you may be a bit worried, yes, but we have the schedule. And so I anticipated that. So the same thing happened last time. It's just the introduction is very long. And for some reason, yeah, it's laid out as if we are going extremely fast. The goal is to not take too much time so we can at least give all the material that's necessary to finish the labs before the RG. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so efficiency. So we were talking about all the different aspects of macroeconomics. Efficiency, there are two different interpretations of it. So in that case, they say it means that resources available to the nation are organized so as to produce the various goods and services that people want to purchase and produce them with the least possible amount of resources. So the key aspect is the second one here. So that's it's neat that it's being highlighted there. So efficiency is really saying if I want to produce whatever I choose to produce, then I produce it in the most efficient way, that the way that costs me the least amount of money. Then, yeah, go ahead. Okay.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
All right. And then this first aspect is sometimes you would say it's another concept such as optimality or Pareto optimality, or sometimes it's saying efficiency too. But yeah, so really the big important point is the second one. Yeah. Because in a way, I could choose to produce something that's not perfectly desired by everybody, but at least I could produce it still in the most efficient way possible. Incentives and self-interest. So economic agents can't be pushed around. So that's maybe what we're trying to do with what the government is trying to do with vaccination. So they started by saying, yeah, we're going to restrict a bit their movements and then make it as even more annoying and even more annoying until we get to the point where we just say, oh, let's have everybody vaccinated and by force, and that's it. So usually what most people would like and what economists would like is that so people cannot are not like molecules or not are sentient beings, and if we want them to do something, we have to incentivize them in some ways to make it their own self-interest to do it. So we do that by incentives. So the sort of incentive that we can that economists like is something like yes, so that's super tiny. Like taxes, subsidies, or tax breaks. So what is the Legault government trying to do there is saying, okay, you can choose not to be vaccinated, but if you get to the emergency room with COVID and not vaccinated, then it costs us money. So it's your choice, but then you're going to pay for it in some way or another with your taxes. Yes, Mohammed, yes, I can't see the full name. Yes,
yeah, what is an incentive? Like what's considered to be an incentive usually?
Yeah, incentive is it's a motivation.
Is there a term for incentive? Like, is there like a negative incentive, positive incentive?
Yeah. So discouraging people. Yeah. Or yeah, disincentive.
Okay.
Discouraging. All right. Sellers usually want to sell more when prices are high, and buyers usually want to buy more when prices are low. So that's the basis of. So that's an assumption that we make about how people behave, but I think it's a fair assumption. If I see that something is extremely expensive, then I'm probably not going to want to buy it. But if the prices go down, or if there's a tax incentive that goes with it, a subsidy or whatever, then I'm more likely to want to buy it. So that's really the core of economics, is saying that people care about what they can buy and money. So make something cheap and they will come and buy it. So 3 types of decision makers operate in any economy. So consumers, producers, government. You could add NGOs. So non-governmental organization, but yeah, there's those are small, very small part of the process. So consumers and producers are the big ones. Government acts like some other economic agents in the sense that do generate some income, but they do by taxes, and they do produce stuff in the form of government services, but they are special special agents. So these two are two who want to just maximize something. So consumers, they want to maximize happiness, or what we call a utility. And the producers, we say that they want to maximize profits or shareholder value. Yeah, oops. So to achieve their objective, they, consumers, maximizing consumer and producer make marginal decisions. This is, I don't know if I talked to you about this one in particular. Yeah, okay. So this is a key point that economists often make. Marginal decision, so marginal.
Sir,
Yeah.
in three types of decision makers in any economy, would there not be four? Would shareholders not be there?
So shareholders are, yeah. Okay, so that's okay. You could say 4, 5, 6, 7. So any market has its own breed of maximizing agents. So for instance, as a consumer, I will usually assume that I have some money that I got from somewhere, I'm not telling where, and then the decision I'm studying as a consumer is, do I buy an apple or do I buy an orange? And what maximizes my utility? And now, so you could, let's add other things. So investors or savers.
Sir?
Yeah.
Would we consider producers and government one thing if we're talking about a socialist or communist party or government?
Say that again?
Would we consider producers and government one thing if we're talking about a communist government, for example, like China or so?
So you're saying, does it matter if you are a government in a country like Canada or a government in a more authoritarian state, for instance, or communist state?
Yeah, because usually they make all the decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
each government, let's just say that like this. Operates in its own institutional environment. And acts rationally acts accordingly.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing.
Yeah.
Because it was said that investors or banks, like those would be individual actors. I would just make one comment on that. I assume that they're like consumers, producers, and governments would be categories. And for example, government like includes politicians, for example, already. And I would assume that producers includes like shareholders or investors, like those kind of participants as a category.
Yeah, so it's what we're trying to do here is organize our way of thinking. Yeah, so you're right. So like investors are also going to use their money and then consume later. So you could also even say something like workers. So because workers are also consumers, but the thing is what we care about when we talk about workers is the labor market. So then the set of decisions that you have to do now is, so should I work 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week? Should I try and find a higher paying job or find a more secure job? Should I take more longer vacations, fewer vacations, this type of thing? And if that's what the set of decisions that interests you, then that's what you're going to model. So yeah, so these are broad categories, but so in a sense, when we go, when we're more precise by describing which phenomenon we are trying to explain, then we're going to, to model specifically the set of decisions that we care about. So, and this is what I was saying here. So governments, usually that's something that's part of a separate, sort of separate discipline, which would be called political economy, which looks at how politicians try to use the economy or affect people's reaction to gain vote and stay in power. So that's something that's different than economics in a pure sense, since what we look at is how the government's decision affect the economy. So that would be the reverse. Yeah. So just finishing here, marginal means precise quantity. So at the margin. So what this means is I'm going to not decide to buy 2 liters of milk and another 2 liters of milk. I'm going to buy 1.456 liter of milks. Yeah, I did talk about this last class, I remember. So does that make sense? It's sort of a first order approximation of what people do. Most of our decisions are actually not marginal, but that's a very neat way to think about things in a way that makes it easy to model, easy to compute. Yeah, so that's the way we're going to look at things. Circular economy. So here's here's the interaction between the labor market or factor markets and the good markets. So we have, so you see these 2 broad categories of actors, so consumers and firms. But here individuals can play the role of consumers on this branch, and you would add workers on on this branch there as so that would be the labor market. But you could also say that they are, if they own capital. So yeah, I could also add that if they own capital, then they can rent their capital to firms, and the firms will pay back interests or yeah, the cost of renting the machine. So it's in many ways you have all these arrows that go from one place to the other, and you can also have an arrow that goes from firm to firm. So why? Well, because some firms do rent to other firms or do produce capital that is used by other firms. So use capital. Investment good. Yeah, so these flows are all, so it's all who produces what to sell to somebody else, and who gains and who pays for it. Yeah, right. So yeah, here it's individuals or consumers
me?
who pay for goods and firms that sell them the goods. And here it's, so for instance, when they take on their worker mantle, then it's workers who sell their service or their workforce to these same firms, and the firms pay back in wages, for instance. Yes.
I'm not quite sure if I understand why from the goods market, goods and services go to firms and to the producers, and not why firms would contribute goods to the goods market.
Well,
Like,
they
I'm not
produce
quite
stuff.
sure why the arrow goes from the goods market to the firms and not from the firms to the goods.
Yeah, so I think so yeah, the way I think they wanted to make their thing is goods and services. So this is like one big red arrow that crosses the good
okay.
market. I think that's
Okay,
how they
perfect.
wanted to.
Thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, otherwise I agree with you. It doesn't make sense.
Weird. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. So circular, yeah, so that's a description of what was just said. So factor services flow from individual through factor markets to firms. So these are workers or people who own capital, who rent this capital to firms. We use them to produce goods. Goods and services flow from firms through good markets to households. Money payments, so that's something else. So that's something else that you could say here. So for instance, shareholders are also individuals who are going to rent, quote unquote, their money for to a firm in exchange for the firm to pay back the money and plus interest or plus dividend payments in the future. So yeah, flow from firms to individuals through another, yeah. Oh, that's something else there. Money payments. Oh yeah, so that's consumers. Yeah. Factor markets, money payments flow from firms to individuals. Oh yeah. Okay, so that's wages, dividends, etc. And when households use this income to buy goods and services, the money flowed from household to firms through the good markets. So in economy, if you study everything at once, or usually you pick like one or two markets at once, and you look at the whole flow, then we say it's a general equilibrium approach or general equilibrium model. That's usually a macro approach. And if you you study only one market and you assume away the other markets, then this is what we call a partial equilibrium, and that's more of a microeconomics approach. So most of the model we're going to see in this class, we're just going to study one market, and especially mostly the good market. So that's what we're going to study mostly in this class. Yeah, so specialization. So what's the great innovation about market economies and modern market economies is a big part of it is specialization of labor and division of labor. So have you heard of whom is famous in the United States for introducing this division of labor? No?
David Ricardo?
Ricardo. Yeah, he's okay. So that's division of yeah, somehow. So that's division of work between two countries, so that they can both of them gain through trade. So that's one. But yeah, on the labor market per se, on the organization of work, it's the name of a car company.
Ford.
Yes.
Henry Ford.
So big, so yeah, important example of productivity by division of 4. Henry 4. Oh, wait a second. I'm just going to close my door. Yeah, so he's a famous one, but you have many other older examples in history of even in ancient China, you had already some instances of division of labor and very, very high productivity ensuing from this. Yeah, so the remark about Ricardo is perfectly good. So individuals' abilities differ. So some people have comparative advantages in something, and some people have comparative advantages in other things. So that's why we have different jobs. So if you're good at economics, then you become an economist. So if you're not good at singing or gardening, then you don't become a singer or a gardener. So yeah, also focusing on one activity leads to improvement. So that's learning by doing. So experience, seniority leads to higher wage. So you may have some inherent talent in something, but if you then go and make it your job, then you become even more knowledgeable and even more precious as a worker.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can a company use both of the two characteristics at the same time?
Yeah, for sure, all the time. So they use people. They hire young, promising workers who look like they are talented in their area, but then, of course, they want to keep them so that they gain experience in the firm. Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you.
So specialization must be accompanied by trade. So within country, this is sort of trade between people, and then between country, this is then we have trade. Money eliminates the cumbersome system of barter by separating transaction involved in the exchange of products. This is somehow in modern anthropology. This is so what people are realizing is that it's very hard to find an instance of barter in any old civilization or any old society. Money gets invented right away. It's just because it's so inconvenient to use barter to say I'm going to exchange 2 fishes for you educating my daughter, for instance, or I'm going to exchange a house for some metal. So it's just so inconvenient, especially with goods that you cannot keep for a long time, or for which the value may fluctuate a lot. So yeah, it's a very natural course of event that you end up with at least metal. Precious metal it appears very soon. Because precious metal, you can carry it around, it doesn't lose its value, and you're pretty sure that everybody is going to want it. Yeah, so then you get money in the end. So that's not a monetary economics class, but I encourage you to take one. It's a fascinating topic. Something I didn't interest me at first, but once I really dug into it, it's super interesting. And right now we are seeing so many different instances of new money, like if you think about Bitcoin, NFTs, and all these things, which create big debates among economists. Well, yeah, not going into this, but yeah, it's very interesting to think about this. Oh yeah, so one thing I would, yeah, specialization between countries. Get gain from trade. Ricardo is our man for that. So we're going to see that towards the end of the class. Globalization is, means two things: a rapid reduction in transportation costs, a revolution in information technology. So this has been a great trend towards the beginning of the 20th century, of course, but towards, so more closer to us, it's been big globalization in the 1990s and 2000, but a bit slowing down in the 2010s up to now. But still, it's a big, yeah.
Is that because of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the subsequent opening of the Iron Curtain, and now where it's like saturated, so it's slowing down?
Oh, it's big number of factors. So I'm not going to dig into this, but one hugely important factors was just the invention of one simple invention: containers. So before, you would just arrive with your ship, and it would take like 2 days to unload the ships with grain in it and other stuff, because it's just so complicated. But once you invent a box, and you say, I don't have to care about what's inside it, I just have to pick the box, put it on a truck, and let it go. It revolutionized things. It went super fast. Also, one thing is, so the world has been going towards services more and more, and whereas it's possible to trade with, so to ship, say, a computer, or ship, I don't know, scissors or whatever. If it's something like a hairdresser, well, you cannot have China send a hairdresser service to Canada. That's just local. So if you have, so even if there's information technology, yes, but not all services can be traded as easily. Also, there's been the 2008 financial crisis. There's been protectionism by Trump and China. There's been now COVID. It's just horrible for world trade. It's going to go down a lot. So yeah, it's been a rough decade so far. Okay, so this I invite you to look at the book, because it's pretty original take on these things. So in a sense, what they're saying in the book is traditional is people do what their parent did mostly. Farm, for instance. So a traditional system is people do always the same thing and don't ask too much question. Command is mostly authoritarian. Yeah, not really authoritarian, but so centralized, top down. Like a king, for instance, or a dictator, who may, you may have a good king or a good dictator. They may do a better job than some president or prime minister, but it has its risk, of course. And then free market is what we have, mostly everywhere now. Yeah, but for the details, I invite you to look at the book. So every economy is a mixed economy in the sense that it combines elements of all three systems. But so the importance of free market has just been growing and growing and growing in recent times. but you would say China is a nice mix of common and free market. You cannot say that China doesn't work. It has its detractors, of course, but they've been pulling it off, and yeah, they have a very, very strong central government, and still they're managing to work with the free market too. So great debates, Karl Marx. So this would have been, if we were in the 80s or 70s, communism would have played a much bigger part in the class, but economics is also a descriptive discipline in the sense that we're interested in what we can observe, and mostly today we observe free markets. So yeah. But back in the days, we would have discussed. So I guess today there's North Korea, which would qualify really as a old-fashioned, yeah, centrally planned system. Most other countries wouldn't qualify. Yeah, and why did it collapse? Well, or not work that much? Well, they were unable to raise living standard up to what we can in free markets, because free market is a decentralized way of organizing economic activity that leads naturally, if it works well, to an efficient outcome. Whereas if you have to decide everything or micromanage everything as a omniscient organizer, it's just impossible right now. So maybe you can, if it's a small society, agrarian, that's not too complicated, but with everything that's going on today, there's just no way you can do that. Yeah, so most governments replaced their system with centralized planning. So in China, do you know who did that? Who changed?
Deng Xiaoping.
It's
Yeah.
Deng Xiaoping.
Oh, I have no idea if I'm writing it properly. Is it this way? Maybe. Yeah, and in USSR, so collapse. That's 1990. Yeah, so all these, so it used to be that you would discuss the viability of centralized control, but yeah, nowadays not really. Yeah, so key government provided institutions is private property and the freedom to contract. So the comment here is no free market economy would function without some institutional framework. Otherwise, what you get is maybe you get the Far West in the United States, but or failed states, but that's very bad. So you need institutions to make sure that people can start a firm or a new idea, and they don't have, or they're not scared that people are going to just mug them or steal what they just did. Correct market failures, we're going to see this later. Provide public goods. Market failures has to do with, so I'm just going to say it briefly. So example, pollution is one. Public goods, well, that's like example, like national defense, parks, etc. Yeah, and offset the effect of these things. So, yeah. Market often work well, but sometimes government policy can improve the outcome of the society as a whole. So this is a key point. It's saying, so people who say, oh, I've taken one introductory economic class and I see that market is perfect. No. Market many market work very well. Toothpaste market is fine. Bicycle markets, yeah, but some markets like healthcare, like education, are complicated and don't work well on their own. So it's a government intervention is perfectly justified if the context is right. So yeah, sometimes it's best to have government policies. So we're done with this. Questions about the introduction? Otherwise, I'm going to continue. No, we're good.
Excuse me, sir.
Someone wants to know example of externalities.
Oh, externalities. Yeah, sorry, I could have written this there. Pollution. So, oh, okay, maybe I'm not seeing the comments. Wait a second, because I have a problem with my screen and I can't see the whole thing. Okay, so if there's a comment and it's important, just raise your voice. So externality is yeah, some effect on third party, which is not taken by people.
So would climate change be a good example?
Yeah, so some effect which is not taken into account by people doing the transaction. Example, pollution is one. An example of positive externality that we use a lot is something like a beekeeper. So if I produce honey, so I need my bees, but my bees have a good effect on my neighbor's field because he's a farmer and my bees help pollinate his field. So if I don't take this into account, then I'm going to produce a small quantity of honey. But if my neighbor comes to me and say, "Oh, please produce more because the more bees, the better I have, the better it goes in my field," then this is a positive externality that I'm producing, and the fact that he's going to tell me, "Please do more," means that I'm going to take this into account. I wasn't taking it into account and I'm going to take it. Pollution is the reverse, is for instance, yeah, so I just bought a Hummer and it pollutes a lot. In this transaction, I didn't care at all about the pollution or the CO2 that my Hummer produces. But then what we should is somehow make me think about the fact that this decision has implication for not just me, but for the whole planet. So that's a huge market failure right there. So market failures are any time that the free market isn't producing an efficient outcome. All right, so continuing. Oh, now I'm seeing the discussion. All right.
Professor, may I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why is global climate change not an indication of the failure of market economics at the same level as the collapse of the USSR was an indication of the failure of command economics? It seems like global climate change has a lot greater repercussions for the human race than the collapse of the USSR.
Oh, yeah, they're both different ways in which markets don't work well. Let's just say it like that. Yeah. So USSR, no, but USSR is a testament to the fact that free markets mostly work better than, say, command and top-down organization. But climate change is a clear, but so what I want to say though is imagine that all the countries around the world are communist countries, for instance. So do you think we wouldn't have climate change? So my bet is, so every communist country would still go to the COP 19, 21, and 22 and try and convince the other countries in the world, oh yeah, do reduce your CO2 emission, but I'm going to commit to as little as possible, so I don't have to do anything. So the thing is, so climate change is a huge coordination problem between everybody, and yeah, so free market is can make it even more difficult, I would say, to organize, but it's at the bottom of it, it's a failure of government government to organize themselves, and also of technology. So if you think about something like, so you may not remember because you're young, but back in the days, we had a problem with the increasing hole in the ozone layer. We had many problems with the acid rains in Europe, in the United States, even in Canada, and these were solved. So does it mean that the free market cannot work? No, if you have a problem that's manageable, that for which there is a technology you can use to substitute, for instance, then we were able to manage hole in the ozone layer and acid rains, for instance. But yeah, so climate change is a global problem, and it's the mother of all difficult problems to deal with. I'm not going to disagree.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing. All right, so this is more of a introduction to the tools that can be used in economics. So distinguishing between positive and normative statements. So this has to do with what economics do and how is economics a science or not a science. How do you test theories? What is a theory? So this is, I would say, I don't like saying learn stuff by heart, but if a question comes at the exam, then it has to be a question that's, so what I'm saying is all these things are open to debate. Every economist has their own conception about how do we really know if a theory is true or not. So yeah, I'm going to go there and not comment too much, in the sense that for you, the goal is to have the right answer at the exam. And I don't want to mislead you in any ways. Yeah. Economic data, this is easy. Graphing economic theories. Okay, so normative and positive statements. So normative statements depend on the value judgment. So this is about what we should or should not do. So if it's saying, if I want the economy to go well, then I should do X or Y. And economists are not always comfortable with this, and there's a big debate about it. Positive statements do not involve value judgment. They are a statement about what we know to be true or false. So this is yeah, it's so you would say that these are descriptions of the world. If X happens, then Y will happen. And this is saying you should do X, for instance.
Are normative statements prescriptive?
Yes, yeah, prescriptive. Exactly, nicely said. Yeah, so economists often disagree with each other in public discussion, but that's so that's one thing though. So if you put just a room of economists together with nobody else, then they are going to start arguing about the minutiae of their discipline and about theories. But if you put economists together with non-economists and everybody starts talking, then after 5 minutes, all the economists are going to gang together in one side of the room, because still they mostly agree with 70 at least % of everything that's going on, because they have their own way of thinking about things, which is sometimes quite different from the average person. So there is always discussion, but that's the same thing with many other disciplines. So if you put chemists together or physicists together, they're operating at the frontier of what they know. So they're not exactly sure. That said, what is going to generate the most discussion? It's exactly about normative statements more than about positive statements. Yeah. Okay, what are theories? Theories are abstractions from reality. It consists of variables, assumptions, predictions. So so if you want an analogy, what I like is to a map. In the sense that a map doesn't describe everything. It chooses what it wants to describe. So if it's a map about the road system, then you're going to see road, and you're not going to see terrain too much, because that's what we're interested about. And it describes a specific so it describes a specific location. So it's a map about Montreal or about Canada. And at some point you say, okay, there are other things further, but I'm not going to care about it. So it's never as good as reality itself, because the reality is the best thing we can have to describe reality. So we have to make simplifying assumptions, and the goal is to make the most judicious simplifying assumptions. So that's what a good theory is all about. Variables is so I could give you an example of theory. If the price goes up, quantity, so yeah, consumers buy less. So that's a theory. That's something I think is true about the world. So what are the variables? So you assume that, what are the variables? They are price and quantity, demanded or bought. What are the assumptions here? So the assumption is, well, I think that,
Sure.
yeah.
Is assumptions the same as a hypothesis?
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
And prediction is, yeah, it's a bit the same. So, yeah. Tomorrow, if the price goes up, consumers will buy less. So it's an extension, yeah, of my theory. It's a prediction about what will happen in the future. So here it would be a conditional statement. If the price goes up, then consumers will buy less. And it can be a good prediction or a bad prediction, because tomorrow I will see if my prediction was good or bad. And if my prediction was bad, then I know that probably my theory was not so good, was wrong. Yeah, so that's the way we test our theories. So theories is tested by confronting its predictions with evidence. So if the theory is in conflict with facts, it will usually be amended to make it consistent with facts, or will be discarded and replaced by a superior theory. So that's the scientific approach. That's something that's not specific to economics. That's something that's true for all sciences. However you like your theory, you think, oh, I really think that, I don't know, sunlight will cure my eczema, for instance. Well, if you go out in the sun and the sunlight didn't cure your eczema, then no matter how much you like your theory, it's wrong. It has the only value of a theory is if it helps you make good prediction. Yeah, so this is a very detailed way of how things should work in theory. So you have your definition, your assumption about behavior, then you deduce how people will act based on this behavior, and you predict. So they are going to buy less if prices are higher, for instance. And then you look, are they buying less or not? And then if they are, then you say, yay, I'm good and my theory passes the test. If not, then you say, oh, but my theory is still good. It's just that I have to tweak it some ways. So that's what scientists do in general. So they don't really reject the theory they really like. So they should, but yeah, sometimes what they do is they're going to say, oh no, but what happened was a freak accident that make my theory not work, but I assure you it's still good. And they're still going to try and publish it until it works. But what you should really do is if a theory just doesn't work, then you should just discard it. Testing theories. So how do we test theories? We confront it with confront its prediction with empirical evidence. And if the theory consistently fails to predict better than average alternative, then it's modified or replaced. But in real life, how does that work? Well, you just wait for researchers who really like this theory to get old and retire and not publish, and then it just goes away. So that's, I don't know who a physicist who said that science advances one funeral at a time. So the only way to really get rid of a theory is when the scientist who came up with it just goes away. But yeah, I'm just joking. So in the exam, if they ask you how do you get rid of a theory, you say it's when its predictions are at odds with the evidence. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
It was Max Planck who said that.
All right. Thank you. Great physicist. Yeah, so statistical analysis is what it means to test a theory rigorously. So your theory may be something like if X increases, or a hypothesis maybe that if X increases, then Y will also increase. So if the sun goes up, then the temperature should go up, for instance. And then what we have to use is millions of uncontrolled experiments going on every day in the marketplace. Yeah, kind of. But we also use, so this is my 2 cents on it. If they ask you, this is the right answer, but in reality, we also use randomized control trial. When did they win their Nobel Prize? It was in 2020, I think. Yeah. So these 3 amazing economists won a Nobel Prize for their I think my spelling of Banerjee must be wrong. Yeah. These 3 economists won the Nobel Prize in 2020 for their introduction of randomized control trials in economics. So how do you do that? Well, so what they did is something like, how do we get people vaccinated? So should we have vaccination camps, or should we incentivize them by giving them a can of lentils, or should we do nothing? So what they did is they randomized their manipulation or their market intervention within villages in India, and they saw what happened, and they realized that giving people just a simple incentive like a can of lentils was enough to convince them to make their kids vaccinated. So this is used a lot in development economics, for instance. Yeah, so it's not always true that we just need millions of uncontrolled experiments. Sometimes we can use randomized control trials too. Yeah, so variables that, yeah, so if we don't have this, so this is the best. Let's see. And that's what we use in medicine all the time. So to test whether vaccine works, you just randomize the people between people who receive a placebo and people who receive a real vaccine, and you check whether the people who receive the real thing do better than the others. So we can have that in economics as well, but it's more complicated. So if you don't have this, then what you have is a problematic case, because in the real world, if you don't randomize properly, then everything influences everything all the time. So it's difficult to pin down what influences what. So many things can go in either way. So you need a very good statistical method or a statistical model to try and pin down the effect you're interested in. But it's never perfect. This is the top of the line that we have. Yeah, so it requires the use of appropriate and complex statistical techniques. So I'm not going to go into that. This is econometrics. It's much later in the game. Positive correlation means only that X and Y move together in the same direction. Negative correlation is X and Y moves in opposite direction. So this is, for instance, sun goes up, it gets warmer, for instance. And this is something else. Yeah, I don't know what, but you can think of your own example. So finding that X and Y are correlated is not evidence of causal relationship. So in economics, what we care about is causal, because what we want to know is if the government does something, is that going to have a real impact? or not. But if you don't have causal relationship, is if you just have correlations, then you're not too sure. So a famous example of that is in Russia, when they had big epidemics going on in the empire, and they were asking themselves, so what makes people sick? And the Tsar looked at the situation and realized, oh, but everywhere where there's an epidemic, I see a lot of doctors. So probably the doctors are the one that making people sick. Of course, if you see sick people and doctors, so there's only one explanation: doctors cause the illness. So that's the difference between having a good reason to think that once something causes the other thing and being confused, and in that case, that's the opposite. So illness causes doctors to go there, of course. All right, so that's questions about this. That was one theme. So just before we continue. No? All right. Index number, this is super easy. So, oh, there's a wrong symbol there. So that's not this. So it's just a multiplication. So why do we like indexes? So when we're looking at something that evolves over time, so a nice, what we really care about is asking ourselves, is it going up or is it going down? So a neat way to doing this is to say, okay, I'm interested in whatever happened after some years, say 2000. So what I'm going to say is 2000 is my base period. And then I'm going to look at what changed, what was the value of the variable in 2002, divided by the value in the base period, and then I multiply by 100, for instance. So CPI, so yeah, CPI. Yeah, I'm just going to check whether I'm writing it properly. Consumer price index. Yeah, consumer price index. And there's also PPI that you don't hear too much about, so producer price index. So consumer price index is what we use to measure. So do you know what?
The price of certain goods over time, like gasoline or like bread or stuff like that.
Yeah, but so what? Yes, so I agree that that's exactly what we're doing. So what phenomenon are we trying to capture by looking at this?
Inflation or purchasing power, or both?
Yeah, exactly. Measures inflation. No, not the purchasing power, because perfect purchasing power is. Yeah, no, actually, you're right. You're right. So consumer price index exactly is how much life costs for people, and that's a sort of measure of how prices are evolving over time. But it's true that it also reflects purchasing power in the sense that if prices of consumer goods are going up while wages are stable, then yeah, so there's a decreasing purchasing power. So why do we see it's more complex index numbers? Because here it's just not just one price, it's a sort of weighted average of the prices of everything. So what you're trying to imagine is, if I'm a typical family, how much am I going to spend on rent, on at the grocery store, for moving around in my car? And then then you account for the changing prices of all these things weighted by their importance in your budget. So it's a much more complicated index number, but still it's an index number at the end of the day. Because what you're saying is, I'm going to say, okay, since 2000, how did prices evolve? And just to see if you're following the news, so what's up with inflation? Is it going up or down or sideways?
It's up significantly.
Yeah, it's up
It's gonna go up.
significantly. Yeah, go
Excuse me.
ahead.
I'm just curious, like in the CPI index, like what kind of goods do they like are composed in that index? Like, is there also home prices accounted for, things like that, or?
Yeah, exactly. So anything that is consumed by consumers, so home is part of it. Yeah, home prices, but yeah, so something like mortgages or rates, I'm not too sure. I'm not a specialist in this. Yeah, but it's usually it's a sort of a bag of or basket of all the goods that consumers may consume. So if they consume homes, then yes, it's part of it. So this is what you get if you use this. So what you say is, oh, I'm going to look at what is it here? Index values of variables. Index of output. Okay, so output. So that's how much it is produced of steel and newsprint. So if you really wanted to look at how steel and newsprint look like in absolute term, then how do you compare that? Like a ton of steel versus hundreds of copies of newspaper, that just it's impossible to compare. But once you decide, okay, I'm going to use some index to measure steel and some index to measure newsprint, and I'm going to say the base year is 2010, and then it's very easy. So you know that in 2000, say 2012, then the output of steel was roughly 12%. Yeah, so that's 10% higher. So yeah, 12% higher than it was in 2010, for instance. And that allows you to put them on two graphs, because here there's no unit. Why? Because these cancel out. So you had some units of, say, kilograms of steel there, so they cancel out, so you don't have to care about them. It just gives you a number that doesn't have any unit attached to it. So you can just put them both on the same graph. And by the way, is that a question for you? Is that a positive or a negative correlation?
It's a negative correlation, but it's spurious.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, it's a negative correlation. And I have no clue why it's there. So it's probably spurious. So a correlation cannot be really spurious, because a correlation is just a description of what you're looking at. But yeah, so the spurious means that it really seems that there's something going on. Oh, in the years in which steel production is high, then newsprint is low. But yeah, so is there a real link that makes sense, that allows me to predict that in the future, if steel goes like this, then newsprints are going to go like this? I'm not really sure. So, but you can always find spurious correlations everywhere. So people did find that the best predictor of which team won the Super Bowl was the price of butter in Afghanistan. But can you really use the price of butter in Afghanistan to predict the 2023 Super Bowl? Good luck. I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it. Okay. So what time is it? Oh, it's 10. All right. So yeah, let's stop here. So questions, comments? No, so we're going to finish chapter. This is chapter 2, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, next time, and then do chapter 3. So once we have done everything, then we're good with the first labs. All right, so go ahead.
When are our quizzes?
Yeah, quizzes are.
It's all on Moodle.
Yeah, quizzes are on Moodle, and so my goal is to finish. Yeah. So we're 13th today, and 23 is lab 1 and 2 due. So yeah, so I'm running as fast as possible. So hopefully we finish in time next time.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Yeah, une Matthews surgery. You can have a question.
Hi, you mentioned something about Ricardo, and I kind of missed out on what you were saying. What were you saying about Ricardo?
Yeah, David Ricardo. Yeah, Adam Smith talked about so many things, but one of the things he talked about is the fact that you could have people with different specialization that would go on the labor market or on the market and exchange their products and make money with that. So gain from the fact that they could specialize in something. And Ricardo was, I think, he was born when Adam Smith was still alive, but just after. And he described basically the same idea, but between countries. So that's sort of the first theory we have of world trade. So why would two countries trade? They would because, for instance, you have the UK that may specialize in electronics, and Canada that specializes in corn, for instance. So Canada exports corn to the UK, and the UK exports electronics to Canada, for instance. So that's this idea.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Have a nice day.
Hi, sir.
Yeah.
I just had a question about opportunity choice.
Opportunity cost?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was looking at like the example about I think what it costs, like the opportunity cost of like going to university. And it made me think of like, if it's purely like looking at two choices where say you're winning an amount of money, how would you find, like, what would be the opportunity cost? Would it be like, would you have to do like an operation between, say you won more money or like you won the less amount of money? Like, I was thinking of an example where you like are picking between two boxes of money, like where you're winning money in each box. And like, say you choose the one with less money, would the opportunity cost be like the more amount of money minus the less amount of money that you won? Or would you just not take into account that amount of money that you're winning and just look at what you didn't choose?
Yeah, it's always what you didn't choose.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if like, say you won 5,000, but you could have won 25,000. You're just thinking about the 25,000?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you don't have to
yeah, but it's not that like you took a risk and you maybe could, no, it's you made a choice. If I have two boxes in front of me, one has $5,000, one has $25,000. If I take box B, then the opportunity cost of taking this box is not getting the box with the 5,000 in it, so it's 5,000. If I take box A with $5,000 in it, then the opportunity cost of taking this box is not getting the order with 25,000 in it.
Okay, so it doesn't matter, like I don't have to do any operations, it's just what you didn't choose that you look at.
So yeah, but imagine you have like, okay, so I'm just going to add a bunch of assumptions there. So we always assume that people are rational, so that you didn't take the $5,000, you took the $25,000. So but it would be perfectly fine saying, yeah, the opportunity cost of taking that box of 5,000 would be not taking this $25,000. But imagine you have three boxes. One has 1,000, one has 5,000, one has 25,000, and you're rational, so you take the one with the 25,000 in it. And then I ask you, what's the opportunity cost of taking that box with 25,000? Then you have to think, okay, what would you have done if you didn't do that? So you otherwise you would just say, well, I don't know, because there were two other choices, I cannot tell you. So no, what you have to say is, I assume that if I hadn't taken the 25,000, then I would have taken the second best choice for me, which would have been the 5,000.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Adam?
Yes, Professor, correct me if I'm wrong, but opportunity cost does not particularly work the best with money. It's more with a informed choice between like different non-tangible options, right?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So the thing is, the best, I think I agree with you in the following sense. So as I said last time, I gave an example of trampoline and flat screen TV. So the opportunity cost of choosing the flat screen TV is not choosing the trampoline. But then also there is a way of thinking about it in terms of what you lose in terms of value. And then you need to have some measure of values you don't get, you lose. So you could measure it in terms of utility or in terms of, a nice way of measuring it is in terms of surplus, or not surplus, but of value for you. And the way to do this is to say, okay, what would make you indifferent between getting a certain amount of Canadian dollars and getting this object? Then this amount of Canadian dollar is exactly the value for you. But you could say, oh, I'm measuring it in units of happiness, for instance. So the opportunity cost of not getting the trampoline is the units of happiness that you would sacrifice by not getting it, for instance. So, I want to help you have a good grade at the exam. And at the exam, the thing that they're likely to say is the value for you of getting this object or that other object, and that other object is $10, $8, $7. So then, and they're asking you a dollar value. So that's what you have to tell them.
So in that case, when you say like you have three items and the opportunity cost for one is 10, the second is 8, and the third is 7, would you answer that the opportunity cost is 15?
No. It's because you cannot choose all of them. So what you say is, for instance, I have three objects. One has a value of $10. The other is 8. The other is 5. I choose the one that gives him the most value. That's the $10. And then what's the opportunity cost of this choice? Well, I couldn't pick the two others. So the thing is, what would I have gotten at best if I didn't choose the one with $10? Is I would have taken the one that gives me 8. So my opportunity cost of choosing the 10 is losing the $8. So it's $8.
Okay, so basically you're saying the opportunity cost is the highest value among all other choices that you could have had.
Exactly.
Okay. Perfect. Also, one more question, Professor. Do you have any idea about in-person classes for next week?
Oh, no, I don't think there's in-person. Is there? I thought that Concordia was sort of postponing. Oh yeah, okay, I have to check that. So I know I have so the short answer is I have no idea. I'm going to check that.
Okay, okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, if not, I'm going to finish this. If I can, but for some reason I cannot access my menu. All right.